Monday morning arrived like every other workday at Tucker Logistics. Employees crossed the lobby carrying coffee cups and laptops. Dispatch managers reviewed delivery schedules. Warehouse supervisors checked overnight reports before trucks rolled onto highways across the southeast. On the top floor, the executive boardroom looked different. Every chair around the long conference table was occupied. Nobody had been told why the meeting had been called. Corporate attorney Elaine Mercer arranged several thick legal folders in front of her. 3 independent board directors quietly reviewed printed documents. 2 outside forensic accountants connected laptops to the conference room monitor, while an auditing team organized sealed evidence boxes along the wall. The room remained almost completely silent. People exchanged brief glances, but very few words. An emergency board meeting with outside specialists usually meant only one thing. Something serious had happened. At exactly 8 o'clock, the boardroom door opened. Holden Tucker walked inside wearing the confident smile employees had come to expect from the company's celebrated chief executive officer. His weekend had gone exactly as planned. He had spent 2 days at the hospital beside Teresa Cullen after she gave birth to their daughter. Holding the baby in his arms had convinced him that the complicated balancing act he had maintained for years could continue just a little longer. His wife believed he had attended an emergency investor retreat. The board believed he had spent the weekend strengthening important business relationships. Teresa believed divorce was only a matter of time. Everyone believed exactly what he wanted them to believe. As far as Holden knew, every secret remained exactly where he had buried it. He looked around the conference room. "So," he said with an easy smile, "I wasn't expecting another board meeting this early. Are we discussing the Nashville expansion?" No one answered. The silence finally caught his attention. He glanced toward Calvin Rhodes. The chief financial officer avoided eye contact. Victor Lang sat with his hands folded, saying nothing. Elaine Mercer closed one of her folders without speaking. Only then did Holden notice several unfamiliar faces seated beside the directors. Outside auditors, forensic accountants. His smile faded slightly. What exactly is going on? Elaine looked toward the far end of the table before calmly speaking. "This emergency meeting has been called by the controlling shareholder." Holden frowned. The controlling shareholder? For a brief second, genuine confusion crossed his face. His eyes slowly moved around the room. Then they stopped. Ariana Gabriel sat quietly near the center of the table. She wasn't dressed any differently than she normally was. A navy business suit. A leather folder resting neatly in front of her. No dramatic expression. No anger. No tears. She looked like someone preparing for another ordinary Monday meeting. She met Holden's eyes. "Please, have a seat." Her voice was steady. Nothing more, nothing less. Holden let out a short laugh that sounded more uncertain than confident. "Ariana, what's this about?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she waited until he finally pulled out a chair and sat across from her. Every movement inside the room seemed measured. Every person waited for her to begin. Ariana opened the leather folder. She removed several documents and slid them across the polished conference table. Original incorporation papers, ownership agreements, executive expense reports, bank transfer records, consulting contracts. They stopped directly in front of Holden. He looked down, then back at his wife. "I don't understand." "You will." She folded her hands together. "I didn't ask everyone to come here because you had an affair." Holden felt his stomach tighten. No one else moved. No one interrupted. Ariana continued. "What happens inside a marriage belongs inside that marriage." She gently touched the stack of financial records. "What doesn't belong inside a marriage?" Her eyes never left Holden. "Is using company money to support another life." Holden's face lost its color. He quickly opened the first folder. The first page showed expense approvals carrying his own signature. The next contained travel reimbursements. Another displayed consulting payments, each document connected to dates he knew by heart. Weekend trips, apartment payments, luxury purchases, hotel reservations. Every approval carried one thing in common: his authorization. For the first time since walking into the room, Holden understood why outside auditors were present. This meeting had never been about exposing his marriage. It was about protecting the company. Before he could say a single word, Elaine Mercer calmly addressed the board. With the controlling shareholders' authorization, today's meeting will review evidence concerning possible misuse of corporate assets, breaches of fiduciary responsibility, and executive misconduct. Holden slowly lifted his eyes toward Ariana. Only now did he realize the truth he had ignored for years. He had spent more than a decade believing he owned everything. He had forgotten who actually did. Welcome to Will and Rye's Stories. To every single person listening right now, thank you for being here. This channel is growing because of people like you, who truly love emotional, unforgettable storytelling. Please support the channel by subscribing. Several years earlier, long before lawyers filled the boardroom and financial records exposed years of deception, Ariana Gabriel lived a simple life built on discipline, responsibility, and quiet determination. She grew up on the south side of Atlanta in a close Black American family where everyone believed a person's character mattered more than money. Every Sunday began at church. Every Sunday afternoon ended around her grandmother's dining table. Family members filled the house with conversation, homemade food, laughter, and advice that stayed with the younger generation long after the meals ended. Her grandmother often reminded the children of one lesson: people may forget what you own, they never forget how you treated them. Ariana carried those words everywhere she went. Her father gave her another lesson she never forgot. He owned a small trucking company with only a handful of employees. It wasn't a large business. It wasn't famous. But it paid mortgages, bought groceries, and helped several families build stable lives. As a teenager, Ariana spent nearly every summer inside his office instead of taking long vacations with friends. She learned how freight contracts worked. She watched dispatchers solve delivery problems before customers noticed delays. She organized invoices. She answered office phones. She filed paperwork. Little by little, she began understanding that transportation was about much more than moving cargo. It was about keeping promises. One afternoon, a driver returned after a mechanical failure delayed an important shipment. The customer was frustrated. The driver expected to be blamed. Instead, Ariana watched her father shake the driver's hand. Is everyone safe? Yes. That's what matters first. Only after making sure everyone was safe did he begin discussing how to help the customer. Driving home that evening, Ariana asked him why he never shouted when problems happened. Her father smiled. Shouting doesn't solve anything. So, what does? Finding the answer. That lesson stayed with her. Whenever problems appeared, she looked for solutions instead of someone to blame. Years later, illness forced her father to sell the trucking company. The decision broke his heart, but he accepted it with dignity. Before he passed away, he placed a small folder in Ariana's hands. Inside were investment accounts he had carefully built over many years. It's not enough to make you rich, he told her. It's enough to help you build something honest. She hugged him tightly. I'll make you proud. I already am. After finishing college, Ariana continued studying business strategy and supply chain management before accepting consulting work with transportation companies across the Southeast. Her reputation grew quietly. She never chased attention. She simply solved problems other companies struggled to fix. One project changed her life. That assignment introduced her to Holden Tucker. Holden worked in transportation sales. He had an outgoing personality that filled every room he entered. Customers trusted him almost immediately. He remembered names. He remembered families. He remembered details from conversations months earlier. People enjoyed doing business with him because he made them feel important. Their first meeting lasted almost 3 hours. It was supposed to be a discussion about shipping routes. Instead, it became a conversation about how regional transportation companies struggled to compete against larger corporations. Holden admired Ariana's ability to break complicated problems into simple solutions. Ariana admired Holden's confidence. He believed opportunities existed everywhere. She believed opportunities only mattered when supported by careful planning. Their strengths fit together naturally. Business meetings slowly became dinner. Dinner became weekend outings. Neither rushed the relationship. Both understood how demanding their careers had become. One evening, Holden invited Ariana to a local food festival after work. They spent hours walking between vendors, talking about everything except business. For the first time, Ariana saw the side of Holden that never appeared during meetings. He laughed easily. He treated strangers kindly. He thanked every vendor they visited. Driving home that night, Holden smiled. "I've been looking forward to spending time with you all week." Ariana smiled back. "I was hoping you'd say that." Their relationship grew stronger over the following months. Friends quickly noticed how naturally they worked together. Holden inspired people. Ariana organized ideas into workable plans. When one dreamed bigger, the other found practical ways to reach those goals. Neither tried to compete with the other. They celebrated each success together. One evening, they sat outside a small restaurant after dinner. Holden looked across the street at trucks pulling into a distribution center. "You ever think about starting our own company?" Ariana looked at the trucks before answering. "Every week." He laughed. "I thought I was the only one." "No. What would you build?" She smiled. "A company people trust." He nodded. "I want the same thing." They spent the next 2 hours talking about freight routes, customer service, driver safety, honest leadership, and building a business that employees would be proud to work for. Neither talked about becoming famous. Neither talked about becoming wealthy. They talked about creating something that would still matter years later. When they finally stood to leave, Holden reached for Ariana's hand. "Let's build it together." She looked at him and smiled. Together. A few months after their wedding, Ariana and Holden stopped talking about owning a business and started working toward it. They spent evenings at their kitchen tables surrounded by notebooks, financial projections, market reports, and maps of freight routes across Georgia and neighboring states. Every dollar they had was carefully accounted for. Every expense was questioned. Every decision had a purpose. Neither wanted to build a company that depended on luck. They wanted one that could survive difficult times. Holden focused on finding future customers. Ariana built the business plan. She calculated operating costs, insurance premiums, fuel expenses, maintenance budgets, payroll projections, and cash flow. By the time they finished, they believed they were ready. The banks disagreed. Their first loan application was rejected within 2 weeks. The loan officer complimented the business plan, but pointed to one problem: no operating history. The second bank reached the same conclusion. The third asked for additional collateral they simply did not have. Each rejection forced them back to the drawing board. Neither blamed the other. Each meeting ended the same way: "We'll try again." Weeks became months. Savings slowly disappeared. Bills continued arriving. Several evenings, Holden looked discouraged. "I didn't think getting started would be this hard." Ariana reached across the table. "Neither did I." He sighed. "Maybe the banks are right." She shook her head. "They're protecting themselves. So what do? "We keep looking for a way." That answer reminded Holden of the advice her father had given years earlier. Find the answer. Don't complain about the problem. The following week, Ariana opened the folder her father had left her before he passed away. She reviewed every investment account, every savings certificate, every retirement fund. It represented years of his hard work. He had hoped it would give her a chance to build something meaningful. That evening, she placed the documents on the dining table. Holden immediately recognized them. "Those are your father's investments." She nodded. "I'm using them." He looked at her in disbelief. "Ariana, that's almost everything." "I know. What if this doesn't work?" She answered without hesitation. "If we don't try, we'll never know." He leaned back quietly. "I can't ask you to risk that." "You're not asking. I'm choosing." He looked at her for a long moment. "You trust me that much?" She smiled. "I trust what we're building." Within days, Ariana transferred nearly her entire inheritance into the new company. The investment solved the immediate funding problem. They purchased their first equipment, leased office space, secured insurance, hired a small team. Most importantly, Tucker Logistics officially became a real company. Before the paperwork was finalized, Ariana and Holden met with corporate attorney Elaine Mercer. Elaine carefully reviewed every incorporation document. She explained ownership percentages, voting rights, future investment procedures. protection for both founders. Finally, she placed one agreement in front of Ariana. Because your investment provides most of the startup capital, you'll become the controlling shareholder unless ownership changes in the future. Holden looked toward Ariana. She simply nodded. Ownership never interested her. Responsibility did. Elaine continued. This gives you majority voting authority. Ariana signed the paperwork without making a speech, without celebrating, without reminding anyone what the documents meant. Holden signed his own copies. He smiled. I guess we're officially in business. Ariana smiled back. We are. As they walked toward the parking lot, Holden laughed. So, technically, you're my boss. She laughed too. No. We're partners. That was exactly how she treated him. She never mentioned voting control, never brought up legal authority, never used the documents during disagreements. To Ariana, the paperwork existed only to protect the company if difficult situations ever appeared. She believed her marriage was built on trust, not legal contracts. The first year tested every promise they had made. Some customers paid late. Others canceled contracts without warning. Fuel prices climbed. Insurance costs increased again. Finding dependable drivers became harder every month. Several nights Ariana remained in the office after everyone left. She reviewed financial reports line by line, searching for ways to stretch every dollar. When suppliers became concerned about delayed payments, she visited them personally. She never made excuses. She explained the company's financial position honestly. We're growing. We're keeping every commitment. We simply need a little more time. Her honesty earned respect. Several suppliers agreed to revised payment schedules because they believed her. At the same time, Holden spent nearly every day on the road meeting potential customers. Many said no. Some never returned his calls. Others gave larger competitors another chance. Still, he refused to quit. Every rejection became another opportunity to improve his presentation. One Friday evening, Holden walked into the office carrying a signed contract. His smile filled the room. We got them. Ariana stood immediately. The manufacturing account? He nodded proudly. They signed this afternoon. She hugged him. This changes everything. It gives us room to breathe. Their first employees celebrated together. No expensive dinner, no luxury hotel, just pizza inside the office after work. Everyone understood how important that customer would become. As the evening ended, Holden looked around the room. We're finally moving forward. Ariana looked at the people laughing together. Drivers, dispatchers, office staff. Every person had taken a chance on a company that barely existed months earlier. She quietly remembered her father's words. Ownership wasn't about power. It was about protecting the people depending on you. Without realizing it, she had already begun doing exactly that. The contract Holden brought into the office became the turning point Tucker Logistics needed. One customer led to another. Satisfied clients recommended the company to other manufacturers. Drivers who appreciated being treated fairly recommended friends looking for stable jobs. The business finally gained momentum. Holden continued winning new accounts. Ariana made sure the company could handle every promise he made. Before accepting new contracts, she studied delivery routes, warehouse capacity, fuel costs, staffing levels, and maintenance schedules. If we can't serve them well, she often said, we shouldn't promise them anything. That approach protected the company's reputation. Customers quickly noticed the difference. Deliveries arrived on time. Phone calls were returned. Problems were solved without excuses. Slowly, Tucker Logistics became known as a company that kept its word. Inside the office, Ariana built systems that allowed the business to grow without losing control. She introduced procedures for dispatch, created financial reporting standards, developed hiring policies, strengthened safety requirements. Every department knew exactly what was expected. Employees appreciated the structure. They always knew where to find answers. When unexpected problems appeared, Ariana worked beside everyone else instead of giving orders from her office. One winter morning, freezing rain delayed several deliveries across Georgia. Dispatchers struggled to reorganize routes before customers opened for business. Instead of watching from her office, Ariana joined the dispatch team. She answered customer calls, reviewed alternative routes, helped drivers adjust schedules. By noon, every shipment had a new delivery plan. One dispatcher smiled. "I've never worked for an executive willing to do this." Ariana smiled back. "We're all trying to solve the same problem." That attitude spread throughout the company. Employees respected her because she never asked anyone to do work she refused to do herself. Holden earned admiration for different reasons. He had become the face customers remembered. He walked into meetings with confidence. He built relationships quickly. He remembered details about clients' families, businesses, and long-term goals. Many contracts were signed because customers trusted him personally. Together, they formed an effective team. Holden opened doors. Ariana built what stood behind them. As the company expanded into neighboring states, more people outside the business began noticing Holden. A regional business magazine featured him in an article about young entrepreneurs. Soon afterward, he received an invitation to speak at a transportation conference. A local television station requested an interview. Holden accepted every opportunity. Before leaving for his first television appearance, he adjusted his tie and smiled at Ariana. "You should come with me." She shook her head with a smile. "You'll do great. They'll probably ask how we built the company. Then tell them." He laughed. "I'd rather have you beside me. You enjoy interviews. I enjoy building the business." He kissed her forehead before leaving. "Wish me luck." "You don't need luck. You've already done the work." The interview was a success. Customers called to congratulate him. Industry leaders introduced themselves after seeing him on television. Soon, another invitation arrived. Then another. Holden became a familiar face at conferences across the Southeast. Each appearance brought more attention to Tucker Logistics. The company benefited from every interview. New customers called. Qualified employees submitted applications. Investors started paying attention. Ariana encouraged Holden to continue. Public visibility helped the business grow faster than either of them expected. Inside the company, employees often joked that Holden could sell anything while Ariana could make anything work. Neither disagreed. The description fit perfectly. As the years passed, Tucker Logistics grew from a small startup into one of the fastest-growing logistics companies in the region. The executive team expanded. More drivers joined the fleet. Warehouses became busier every month. The future looked brighter than ever. At home, life also became richer. Their son, James, filled the house with laughter, endless questions, and toy trucks scattered across the living room floor. Some evenings he sat beside Ariana while she reviewed reports. "Mom, what are you working on?" "Our company." "Is it hard?" "Sometimes." "Why do you keep doing it?" She smiled. "Because families depend on it." James nodded, even if he didn't fully understand. Holden often arrived home later after meeting customers across different states. James ran to the front door the moment he heard his father's truck. "Dad!" Holden lifted him into the air. "How's my future CEO?" James laughed. "I'm going to drive the biggest truck." Holden laughed too. "That works for me." For a long time, life felt balanced. The business was growing. Their marriage was strong. Their son was happy. Neither imagined how quickly success could change people. The first signs were small. After another television interview, a reporter introduced Holden as the man who built Tucker Logistics. He smiled and thanked her. He never corrected the statement. Ariana noticed. She said nothing. The company had gained valuable publicity. Correcting one sentence seemed unnecessary. Months later, another magazine published a feature calling Holden the visionary founder behind the company's remarkable growth. Again, he accepted the praise without mentioning Ariana's role. She read the article during breakfast. Holden looked at her. "What do you think?" She folded the magazine. "It'll bring in more business." "You don't mind?" She smiled. "As long as the company benefits." Holden nodded. He accepted the answer without thinking much about it. But something had started changing. Recognition became easier to enjoy. Each interview led to another. Each award increased his confidence. Each public appearance made people associate Tucker Logistics with one face instead of two. Ariana never competed for attention. She believed results mattered more than headlines. She stayed focused on strengthening the company, while Holden accepted more invitations to represent it. Neither realized those small changes were quietly leading them toward the morning that would one day bring them back together inside the boardroom, sitting on opposite sides of the same table. Tucker Logistics entered its strongest years. The company expanded beyond Georgia into Tennessee, Alabama, Florida, and the Carolinas. New warehouses opened. The fleet grew larger. Major manufacturers signed long-term shipping contracts. Revenue increased every quarter. Employees believed the future had never looked brighter. With every expansion came more attention. Business magazines requested interviews with Holden. Industry conferences invited him to speak. Television stations wanted successful business owners who could explain how regional companies competed with national corporations. Holden accepted nearly every invitation. He enjoyed meeting investors, customers, and executives from across the country. Each appearance brought new opportunities. It also brought new attention. One afternoon, the board approved a nationwide branding campaign. The company wanted a stronger public image before expanding farther across the country. Several marketing firms submitted proposals. After weeks of reviewing presentations, the board selected Teresa Cullen. She was young, creative, organized, and understood how businesses built public trust. Her responsibility was simple: modernize Tucker Logistics' image, improve its advertising, coordinate executive interviews, strengthen the company's presence across digital platforms. She immediately got to work. Within weeks, new advertising campaigns appeared. The company website was redesigned. Customer communication improved. Trade publications began noticing the changes. Everyone agreed Teresa was doing excellent work. Most of her meetings involved Holden because he represented the company during interviews and public events. They reviewed presentation materials together, prepared speeches, discussed media schedules, planned customer conferences. Nothing about their working relationship appeared unusual. Ariana appreciated Teresa's professionalism. During one strategy meeting, Teresa presented a new branding proposal. After the presentation ended, Ariana smiled. "You understand our customers." Teresa thanked her. "I've spent a lot of time listening to what they expect." Ariana nodded. "Keep doing that." Holden agreed. "She's done outstanding work." The campaign continued moving forward. As the months passed, Holden and Teresa spent more time together preparing for conferences in different cities. Flights became common. Hotel meetings followed long workdays. Late dinners often continued discussions that began inside conference rooms. At first, every conversation focused on business. Soon they talked about life outside work. Teresa asked about Holden's career. He spoke about building Tucker Logistics. She admired his confidence. She admired the way people listened whenever he entered a room. The admiration fed something inside Holden that had been growing for years. He enjoyed being seen as the man responsible for the company's success. The attention became harder to ignore. One evening after a successful transportation conference, Holden and Teresa remained inside the hotel restaurant after everyone else had left. She smiled. "You make leadership look easy." Holden laughed. "It isn't. You hide it well." He appreciated hearing that. At home, Ariana never praised appearances. She cared about results. Teresa admired the image the public saw. Holden slowly began enjoying that difference. The conversations became more personal. Teresa eventually asked a question. "Does your wife travel with you often?" Holden shook his head. "She prefers staying focused on operations." "That must be difficult." "Sometimes." He could have ended the conversation there. Instead, he kept talking. He described long workdays, late meetings, the pressure of running a growing company. Everything he said contained enough truth to sound convincing. What he failed to mention was that Ariana carried just as much responsibility. Teresa listened carefully. She began believing Holden carried the company almost entirely by himself. He never corrected her. Weeks later, another conference brought them together again. This time they met for dinner after finishing meetings with potential customers. Business lasted only a few minutes. The rest of the evening became personal conversation. Holden spoke about feeling exhausted. Teresa listened. She spoke about the pressure of constantly proving herself inside a competitive industry. Holden listened. Both found comfort in those conversations. One dinner became another. Phone calls continued after business hours. Messages arrived late at night. The line between work and personal life slowly disappeared. Holden knew exactly what was happening. He also knew he should stop it. Instead, he convinced himself it wasn't hurting anyone. He told himself Ariana cared more about company strategy than their marriage. He ignored everything she had sacrificed to help build both. Teresa eventually believed Holden's marriage existed only on paper. She believed he and Ariana stayed together for business and for James. Holden allowed that belief to grow. He never admitted that Ariana still trusted him completely. He never admitted that she still planned family dinners around his travel schedule. He never admitted that she still defended him whenever James complained about another missed weekend. Those truths would have forced him to face his own choices. It felt easier to keep living two different lives. Before long, Holden crossed the line he once believed he never would. His professional relationship with Teresa became an affair. He walked away believing he could control the consequences. He had no idea that the decisions he made during those months were quietly placing both his family and Tucker Logistics in danger. The affair quickly became more expensive than Holden expected. Teresa lived in another city. Every visit required airfare, hotel rooms, restaurants, and transportation. At first, Holden paid the bills himself. Within a few months, the costs became difficult to hide. He searched for another solution. Instead of reducing the relationship, he began charging personal expenses to Tucker Logistics. He convinced himself it was temporary. He planned to repay everything later. That day never came. The first transactions were small. A dinner became client entertainment. A hotel became executive travel. A flight became a marketing meeting. No one questioned them. The accounting department processed the reimbursements because they carried the CEO's approval. Holden became more confident. Soon the amounts increased. He approved consulting invoices for work that never happened. Marketing expenses covered apartment rent. Travel budgets paid for weekends with Teresa. Furniture purchases appeared under promotional projects. Each payment looked legitimate on paper. Each description sounded professional. Anyone reading quickly would have seen nothing unusual. Calvin Rhodes never reviewed financial records quickly. Every month he examined every major payment before closing the books. Years of experience had taught him one lesson. Numbers usually told the truth. One afternoon he noticed 3 consulting invoices submitted by different companies. The amounts were different. The company names were different. The formatting looked exactly the same. The wording matched almost line for line. Even the punctuation was identical. Calvin printed the invoices and placed them side by side. He frowned. That wasn't normal. The following morning, he asked the accounting department for supporting documents. The files arrived within an hour. Everything appeared complete. Invoices, contracts, payment approvals. Still, something felt wrong. He requested additional vendor information. The addresses existed. The companies had been registered. Very little actual work could be verified. Calvin continued checking. Several payments had produced no measurable marketing results. He quietly made copies of every document and stored them in a secure file. He wasn't building a case against anyone. He was protecting the company until the facts became clear. Later that afternoon, Holden walked into Calvin's office. "I heard you've been reviewing marketing expenses." Calvin nodded. "I review every department." "Any problems?" "I have questions." "They're approved expenses." "I know. So what's the concern?" "I'd like more supporting documentation." Holden forced a smile. "I'll have someone send it over." "I'd appreciate that." Holden left the office looking calm. Inside, he knew Calvin had noticed more than he expected. That evening, he contacted one of the vendors involved in the false invoices. "I need everything to match the paperwork." The response came quickly. "It'll be handled." New documents arrived at the accounting department 2 days later. They looked complete. Calvin reviewed them carefully. The paperwork answered some questions. Not all of them. He added the new documents to his growing file. He decided to watch instead of accuse. Elsewhere inside headquarters, Naomi Brooks noticed something different. As Ariana's executive assistant, She coordinated executive schedules every day. She arranged flights, confirmed meetings, reserved conference rooms, updated travel calendars. The work required attention to detail. Over time, unusual patterns became difficult to ignore. Holden regularly extended business trips by 1 or 2 days. Several hotel reservations appeared outside company booking procedures. Some meetings listed on his calendar had no customer names attached. Others disappeared after they were supposedly completed. Naomi never assumed misconduct. She simply noticed inconsistencies. One morning, Ariana stepped into Naomi's office. "Has Holden confirmed next month's investor conference?" Naomi checked the calendar. "Yes." She continued reading. "He'll attend the conference." Ariana nodded. "Good." Naomi looked back at the schedule. He also added 2 extra days. "For customer meetings?" "That's what the request says." Ariana smiled. He probably found new opportunities. "I expect so." Naomi returned the smile. She said nothing else. She respected Ariana too much to raise concerns based only on unusual scheduling. Across the hall, Calvin continued watching financial reports. Every month, the same pattern appeared. Executive travel increased. Marketing expenses continued rising. Consulting invoices multiplied. The company's profits remained strong enough to hide the problem. That concerned him even more. If business had been struggling, someone would have discovered the irregularities much sooner. Strong revenue had buried them beneath thousands of legitimate transactions. Calvin organized every questionable payment by date, every invoice, every approval, every vendor, every transfer. He locked the file inside his cabinet. He hoped he would never need it. Meanwhile, Holden believed he had solved the problem. The false invoices had passed accounting. The company continued growing. The board celebrated another successful quarter. No one confronted him. He convinced himself the danger had passed. He never realized 2 people inside the company had already begun noticing pieces of the same story. Calvin was following the money. Naomi was following the schedule. Neither understood the full truth yet. Both were getting closer with every passing week. Calvin Rhodes waited until he had enough information before speaking to Ariana. He refused to accuse anyone without facts. One Monday morning, he knocked on her office door carrying a thin folder. Ariana looked up from her computer. "Come in." Calvin placed the folder on her desk. "I'd like you to review something." She opened it. Inside were copies of consulting invoices, expense reports, vendor information, and payment summaries. She looked through the documents carefully. "What am I looking at?" "I don't know yet." She looked back at him. "You don't?" He shook his head. "I know the numbers don't fit normal business patterns." "You think someone made a mistake?" "I hope that's all it is." Ariana continued reading. The payments were unusual. Marketing costs had increased. Several consulting firms billed the company repeatedly. Some projects produced little measurable value. Nothing clearly proved misconduct. Nothing clearly explained the spending either. She closed the folder. "Has anyone else seen this?" "No." "You haven't discussed it with the board?" "No." "You haven't accused Holden?" "Never." Calvin met her eyes. "I brought this to you because you deserve to know before anyone else." Ariana appreciated his professionalism. "Thank you. I'll speak with Holden." Calvin nodded. "That's exactly what I hoped you'd do." That evening, Ariana arrived home before Holden. James was finishing homework at the kitchen table. She helped him solve a science assignment before they ate dinner together. An hour later, Holden walked through the front door. James smiled. "Dad." Holden hugged his son. "How was school?" "I got an A on my project." "I knew you would." The evening felt completely normal. After James went upstairs, Ariana carried 2 cups of coffee into the living room. Holden smiled. "This is nice." She handed him a cup. "I wanted to ask you about work." He looked relaxed. "What about it?" "I reviewed several consulting expenses today." His smile faded for only a second before returning. "What about them?" "There are a few payments I don't recognize. They're part of the marketing campaign. I couldn't connect some of them to completed projects." Holden took a sip of coffee. Marketing handles those details. I know. I just wanted to understand them. They're legitimate. Ariana watched him. I wasn't accusing anyone. I know. I simply wanted an explanation. I'll have accounting organize everything. She nodded. That would help. The conversation ended peacefully. No argument, no raised voices, no accusations. Holden changed the subject and asked about James. Ariana answered naturally. She believed the matter would soon be clarified. The following morning, Holden contacted the people responsible for the false consulting invoices. They're asking questions again. We'll update the paperwork. It needs to match every payment. It will. Within days, additional documents reached the accounting department. Everything appeared complete. Calvin reviewed every page. The paperwork answered the questions Ariana had raised. It still failed to explain why the consulting work produced almost no measurable results. He quietly added the new records to his secure file. He decided to keep watching. Meanwhile, Ariana chose trust over suspicion. She had spent more than a decade building both a marriage and a company with Holden. She refused to believe a few unusual invoices meant something larger. She returned her attention to expansion plans, customer contracts, and daily operations. She never imagined Holden was hiding far more than financial records. Across town, Teresa waited inside her apartment. Holden arrived carrying dinner. She smiled as he walked in. You made it. I told you I would. They ate together while talking about the future. Teresa looked unusually quiet. Holden noticed. Is something wrong? She reached into her purse and placed a small envelope on the table. He opened it. Inside was a medical report. He looked at her. You went to the doctor? She nodded. I'm pregnant. Holden stared at the paper. For several seconds, he said nothing. Then a slow smile appeared. You're sure? Yes. He leaned back in his chair. The reality settled over him. He was about to become the father of another child. Teresa reached across the table. What are you thinking? He took her hand. I'm thinking everything is about to change. She smiled with relief. I was afraid you'd be upset. I'm not. She searched his face. What happens now? Holden answered, without hesitation. I'll leave Ariana. When? Soon. You've said that before. I mean it. I don't want our baby growing up as someone's secret. Holden squeezed her hand. Our child won't. You promise? I promise. Teresa believed every word. She began planning the life she thought was waiting ahead. Holden left her apartment believing he still had time to control everything. He believed he could manage his marriage, protect his public image, hide the financial records, build another family. He failed to see that every lie depended on the one before it. The truth was moving toward him faster than he realized. The morning that would change his life forever was no longer far away. Months passed. Business at Tucker Logistics continued growing. New contracts arrived every week. Board members celebrated another successful quarter. Customers praised the company's reliability. From the outside, everything looked stronger than ever. Behind closed doors, Holden lived two separate lives. One belonged to his family. The other belonged to Teresa. When Teresa entered the final weeks of her pregnancy, Holden became even more careful. He adjusted his schedule, created extra business trips, added meetings that never existed. Every explanation sounded reasonable. Ariana believed him. She had trusted Holden for too many years to think differently. One Thursday afternoon, Teresa called. It's time. Holden immediately left his office. He informed his assistant that an important investor had requested an emergency weekend meeting outside the city. The explanation reached Ariana before he arrived home. That evening, he packed a small travel bag. James looked up from the living room. Are you leaving again? Holden smiled. I'll be back before you know it. James nodded. I wanted us to shoot basketball this weekend. We'll do it next weekend. James accepted the answer. He had heard similar promises before. Ariana walked Holden to the front door. Good luck with the investors. He kissed her. Thanks. I'll call when I can. I'll be here. He drove away. Instead of heading toward the conference center he had described, he drove straight to the hospital where Teresa had already been admitted. Several hours later, their daughter was born. Holden stood beside Teresa, holding the baby in his arms. For a moment, every business problem disappeared from his mind. He smiled at the little girl sleeping peacefully. Teresa watched him. She's beautiful. She is. You look happy. I am. She reached for his hand. We're finally a family. Holden smiled. We are. He stayed at the hospital throughout the weekend. He answered only a few business messages. Whenever Ariana called, he explained that meetings had lasted longer than expected. She never questioned him. Back home, James kept asking the same question. When is Dad coming home? Soon, Ariana answered. He said the meetings are taking longer. James nodded. I'll wait. Sunday evening arrived. Holden remained at the hospital. Teresa's family visited throughout the day. One relative suggested taking pictures with the baby. Everyone gathered around the hospital bed. Holden stood beside Teresa, holding their daughter. Several photographs were taken. A family member smiled. This one is perfect. Without thinking much about it, another family member uploaded one of the photographs to social media. The caption welcomed the newest member of the family. Congratulations filled the comments within minutes. Holden never saw the post. He was busy speaking with a nurse. Monday afternoon, Naomi Brooks sat inside her office reviewing executive travel schedules for the coming week. While checking company updates online, a suggested social media post appeared on her screen. She almost ignored it. Then she recognized a familiar face. She clicked the photograph. Her expression changed immediately. The picture showed Holden standing beside Teresa inside a hospital room. A newborn baby rested in his arms. Naomi looked at the caption again. Then she looked at the date. The picture had been posted only hours earlier. She quietly closed her office door. Her first thought was that someone had manipulated the image. She enlarged it. There was no mistake. Holden wore the same silver watch Ariana had given him on their anniversary. The hospital identification band remained on his wrist. Everything was real. Naomi sat silently for several seconds. She respected Ariana too much to ignore what she had found. She also understood the seriousness of sending something that could destroy a marriage. She reviewed the post one final time. Then she copied the link. That evening, Ariana prepared dinner while James finished homework at the kitchen table. Her phone vibrated. The message came from Naomi. I think you need to see this before tomorrow morning. Ariana opened the link. The photograph filled her screen. Holden, Teresa, a newborn baby. She stared at the image. Every unexplained business trip returned to her memory. Every strange invoice Calvin had shown her. Every unusual travel schedule Naomi quietly managed. Every late meeting. Every missing weekend. Every answer Holden had given her. The pieces finally fit together. She lowered the phone slowly. James looked toward her. Mom? She forced a gentle smile. I'm all right. Are you sure? Yes. She walked over and hugged him tightly. James hugged her back without asking another question. After he returned to his homework, Ariana looked at the photograph once more. She didn't cry. She didn't call Holden. She didn't call Teresa. She understood something much bigger than an affair had happened. Her husband had used the company they built together to support another family. That truth changed everything. Ariana put her phone on the kitchen counter. She looked toward James. He was still focused on his homework. She smiled at him. Finish up, sweetheart. I'll be in my office. Okay, Mom. She walked into her home office and quietly closed the door. Only then did she allow herself to look at the photograph again. Everything Holden had hidden stood in front of her. The affair, the baby, the weekends he claimed belonged to investors, the business trips that never existed, the strange invoices Calvin had questioned. She finally understood why the numbers never made sense. She closed the picture. Her next decision would determine the future of her family and the company. She refused to make that decision through anger. She reached for a storage cabinet and removed several document boxes. Inside were the original records from the day Tucker Logistics was formed. She opened the first folder, the incorporation agreement, the shareholder records, the investment documents showing the inheritance she had contributed. Every signature remained exactly where it had been placed years earlier. She continued opening folders. Board resolutions, bank financing agreements, corporate bylaws. Nothing had changed. She was still the controlling shareholder. Holden had never asked to change the ownership structure. She placed every important document into a new file. Next, she opened the folder Calvin had given her weeks earlier. The consulting invoices, marketing expenses, vendor records, payment approvals. She slowly matched each expense against Holden's travel dates. The pattern became impossible to ignore. The weekends he claimed to meet investors matched hotel charges. Marketing invoices appeared beside apartment payments. Travel reimbursements lined up with the same dates he visited Teresa. Every page supported the next one. This was no longer about suspicion. It was about evidence. Ariana picked up her phone. Her first call went to Elaine Mercer. Elaine answered immediately. Ariana, I need your help. I'm listening. I want an emergency board meeting tomorrow morning. Elaine became serious. Does Holden know? No. Is this about the financial records? It's about much more than that. Elaine waited. Ariana continued. I have proof that company resources were used for personal purposes. Elaine answered without hesitation. I'll begin notifying the board. I also want independent legal oversight. You'll have it. And outside auditors. I'll arrange them. Ariana thanked her and ended the call. She immediately called Calvin Rhodes. Calvin answered. Good evening. I need every document you've saved. I already have them organized. I thought you might. I'll bring everything. Thank you. The next call went to Victor Lang. Victor, I need you at headquarters first thing tomorrow morning. Is something wrong? Yes. Should I prepare for a difficult meeting? I believe so. You can count on me. She ended the call. Elaine worked quickly. Within the next hour, every independent director received the same confidential notice. Mandatory emergency board meeting. Attendance required. No substitutes. No delays. No discussion outside the boardroom. Elaine also contacted one of the country's most respected forensic accounting firms. She requested an independent review beginning the following morning. Outside auditors agreed to attend. Every step protected the integrity of the investigation before it even began. Meanwhile, Ariana continued preparing. She arranged every document in chronological order. Ownership records first. Financial reports second. Expense approvals next. Supporting evidence behind each transaction. Nothing would be presented without proof. Near midnight, she reviewed everything one final time. Every page supported the next. Every date matched. Every signature belonged to Holden. No assumptions, only facts. She finally closed the last folder. Her phone rang. Holden. She looked at the screen, then answered. Hi. You still awake? Yes. The meeting's finally wrapped up. I hope everything went well. It did. I'll be home tomorrow. We'll see you then. Tell James I love him. I will. Good night. Good night. The call ended. Holden never realized Ariana already knew where he had spent the weekend. She placed the phone beside the folders. There was nothing left to discuss. The answers would come inside the boardroom. Before going upstairs, Ariana walked into James's bedroom. He was already asleep. She gently pulled the blanket over his shoulder. She looked at him for a moment. Her marriage had been built on trust. Her company had been built on responsibility. She could no longer protect one by sacrificing the other. Early the next morning, Ariana arrived at Tucker Logistics before sunrise. She carried one leather folder. Inside, it was everything she needed. Elaine was already waiting. So are the directors, Elaine said. The auditors? They're setting up now. The forensic accountants? They arrived 10 minutes ago. Ariana nodded. Good. Calvin entered carrying 2 secured storage boxes. Everything is here. Victor followed moments later. The board is ready. Outside the boardroom, Employees began arriving for another ordinary Monday. Inside that room, the future of Tucker Logistics was about to change forever. A few minutes later, the elevator doors opened. Holden stepped onto the executive floor, completely unaware that every piece of the life he had carefully hidden was waiting for him on the conference table. Holden stepped out of the elevator carrying his briefcase. He greeted employees as he walked toward the executive offices. "Good morning." Several people answered. "Morning, Mr. Tucker." Everything looked normal. Nothing suggested the biggest day of his career had already begun. His assistant looked up as he approached. "Good morning." "Morning." She handed him a folder. "The board meeting has been moved to the large conference room." Holden looked surprised. "We have a board meeting today. It was scheduled yesterday evening." "Who called it?" "I'm not sure." He shrugged. "Probably another expansion discussion." He walked toward the boardroom. As soon as he opened the door, he noticed something unusual. Every director had already arrived. Elaine Mercer sat beside several legal files. Calvin Rhodes had arranged binders across the conference table. Victor Lang quietly reviewed printed documents. 2 forensic accountants were setting up presentation equipment. 3 outside auditors sat beside them. Holden frowned. "What is all this?" Nobody answered immediately. He looked toward Ariana. She sat in the same seat she always used during board meetings. A leather folder rested in front of her. Her expression revealed nothing. Elaine stood. "This emergency meeting has been called by the controlling shareholder." Holden looked around the room. The controlling shareholder? Then he looked directly at Ariana. She met his eyes. "Please, have a seat." His confidence slipped. He slowly sat down. Elaine officially opened the meeting. "The purpose of today's session is to review evidence concerning possible misuse of corporate assets, breaches of fiduciary responsibility, conflicts of interest, and executive misconduct." Holden stared at her. "What are you talking about?" Ariana opened her folder. She slid several documents across the table. "Start with these." Holden looked down. Expense reports, bank transfers, consulting invoices, travel reimbursements. Every page carried his approval. He looked back at Ariana. "These are business expenses." Calvin calmly opened another binder. "Some are." He pressed a button on the remote. The large screen displayed payment records, vendor information, bank account details, travel dates, apartment lease records. One transaction matched another, every document connected to the next. A forensic accountant stood. "Our review found repeated payments described as consulting services." He changed the screen. "These companies received corporate funds." Another document appeared. The same funds were transferred to accounts connected to Teresa Cullen. Holden's face tightened. The next screen showed travel records. These reimbursements matched weekends reported as investor meetings. Another document appeared. The destinations match hospital visits, apartment payments, and personal travel. No one in the room spoke. The evidence spoke for itself. Victor looked toward Holden. "Were these expenditures presented to the board?" Holden hesitated. "No." "Were they approved as executive compensation?" "No." "Were directors informed company funds supported a personal relationship?" He lowered his eyes. "No." Elaine placed another document on the table. The original incorporation agreement. She turned it toward the directors. "This agreement confirms Ariana Gabriel has remained the controlling shareholder since the company was formed." Several newer directors exchanged surprised looks. Victor nodded. "I remember approving these documents." Elaine continued. "The ownership structure has never changed." Holden looked at Ariana. "You kept this from me." She answered immediately. "No. You signed these papers. You were there. You simply stopped remembering them." The room became quiet again. Holden looked at the incorporation agreement. He remembered signing it years earlier. At the time, it had never seemed important. He believed marriage made ownership irrelevant. Now it determined everything. Ariana looked directly at him. "I never cared about controlling the company. I cared about protecting it." She placed another folder in front of him. "This is every payment connected to your hidden relationship. You didn't only betray your family, You violated the trust of every employee who helped build this company. Holden had no answer. Elaine addressed the board. The evidence has been independently reviewed. The financial records support the findings presented today. Victor spoke first. I move that Holden Tucker be suspended immediately as Chief Executive Officer pending completion of the independent investigation. Another director immediately seconded the motion. The vote began. One hand after another was raised. Every vote supported the motion. Elaine looked toward Holden. Effective immediately, your executive authority is suspended. She continued reading. Your access to company financial systems is revoked. Your authority to approve expenditures is terminated. Your company laptop, executive phone, and access card must be surrendered before leaving the building. Holden slowly closed the folder. Everything he had built around himself disappeared within minutes, not because of rumors, not because of revenge, because the documents proved the truth. He stood without arguing. He removed his access card and placed it on the table. Next came his company phone, then his laptop. He looked once at Ariana. I'm sorry. She answered quietly. This meeting wasn't called to hear apologies. It was called to protect the company. Holden nodded. He understood. Without another word, he walked toward the door. No one followed him. No one insulted him. The board watched him leave. After the door closed, Ariana looked around the room. Our employees will have questions. Our customers will have concerns. Our investors will expect answers. She looked at Calvin. I recommend Calvin Rhodes serve as interim chief executive officer until this investigation is complete. Victor nodded. I support the recommendation. The directors voted. The decision passed unanimously. Calvin looked at Ariana. I'll protect the company. I know you will. Ariana closed her folder. The hardest decision of her life was over. Another responsibility had already begun. She was no longer protecting only the business she helped build. She was protecting every family whose future depended on it. News traveled through Tucker Logistics before lunchtime. Employees noticed Holden had not returned to his office. His executive parking space remained empty. Security collected company equipment. Department managers received unexpected calls from human resources, asking them to attend an afternoon meeting. Rumors spread across every office. Some believed the company had been sold. Others feared bankruptcy. Drivers called dispatch, asking if they should start looking for new jobs. Warehouse supervisors struggled to answer questions they didn't understand themselves. Ariana knew uncertainty could damage the company faster than any newspaper headline. She immediately called a meeting with department leaders. By early afternoon, managers from every division filled the main conference room. Calvin stood beside her. Elaine and Victor also attended. Everyone waited for Ariana to speak. She looked around the room. I know many of you have heard rumors. Every face remained fixed on her. I cannot discuss every legal detail because an independent investigation is underway. She continued without hesitation. I can tell you 3 things. The company is financially stable. Your jobs are not in danger because of decisions made by one executive. And Tucker Logistics will continue serving every customer. The room relaxed almost immediately. Several managers nodded. One warehouse supervisor raised his hand. Should we tell employees business will continue as usual? Yes, Ariana answered. And tell them something else. What? Every decision from today forward will be based on honesty. The meeting ended with clear instructions. Managers returned to every department. Within an hour, employees began hearing the same message. Operations would continue. Deliveries would continue. Payroll would continue. The company was not closing. Confidence slowly returned. Meanwhile, outside investigators began their work. The forensic accounting team occupied a conference room filled with financial records. Calvin unlocked every cabinet without hesitation. He handed over every file he had preserved during the previous months. One investigator looked at him. You've kept excellent records. Calvin nodded. My responsibility was to protect the company. The investigators reviewed years of financial activity, consulting contracts, executive expenses, travel reimbursements, marketing budgets, Vendor payments. Every transaction received careful examination. Within days, the pattern became unmistakable. Company money had repeatedly funded Holden's private relationship with Teresa. Several consulting agreements existed only on paper. Marketing expenses covered personal purchases. Travel records matched weekends unrelated to company business. Nothing suggested anyone besides Holden directed the misconduct. That finding mattered. Employees had acted honestly. The finance department had followed approved procedures. The misconduct centered on the CEO's misuse of executive authority. The board immediately informed major investors that an independent investigation was underway. Several investors requested emergency meetings. Some expected excuses. Others expected panic. Instead, Ariana met every group with the same approach. She answered every question directly. She explained the investigation. She outlined the company's financial position. She described the temporary leadership structure. One investor asked the question everyone wanted answered. Can this company recover? Ariana answered without hesitation. The company was built by hundreds of honest employees. One person's decisions will not erase their work. The answer impressed the room. No promises, no exaggeration, only facts. Large customers also began calling headquarters. Several wanted reassurance before renewing contracts. Ariana personally returned those calls. She never minimized the situation. She explained exactly what the company was doing. Independent investigators, outside auditors, board oversight, improved financial controls. One longtime customer listened carefully. Finally, he said, "You told us the truth before anyone forced you to." Ariana replied, "That's the only way we'll earn your trust again. We're staying with you." Other customers reached the same decision. The company's reputation had been damaged. Its integrity had not. By the end of the first week, Tucker Logistics continued delivering freight across every state it served. Drivers stayed on the road. Warehouses remained busy. Customers kept shipping. Employees kept working. The company had survived its hardest week. Now Ariana faced an even greater challenge. She had to rebuild the organization so the same mistake could never happen again. Once the investigation stabilized the company, Ariana focused on its future. She refused to spend months talking about Holden's mistakes. Her attention shifted to building a stronger business. She called a special board meeting. Calvin, Elaine, Victor, and the directors gathered once again. This meeting was completely different. No evidence, no legal arguments, only plans for the future. Ariana stood before the board. "We've protected the company. Now we improve it." Victor nodded. "What do you recommend?" Ariana opened a presentation. "The first change is governance. No executive should ever have enough authority to hide financial decisions." The directors agreed immediately. New policies were approved. Large expenditures would require multiple approvals. Independent board committees would review executive expenses every quarter. Outside audits would become mandatory every year. No executive could approve major consulting contracts alone. Financial reporting would become more transparent. The vote passed unanimously. Calvin smiled. "These changes should have existed years ago." "They do now," Ariana replied. The next decision surprised the room. Ariana recommended changing the company's name. Victor looked at her. "Tell us why." "The business deserves a new beginning. This isn't about erasing history. It's about building trust." The board approved the proposal. Over the following weeks, Tucker Logistics officially became Gabriel Integrated Logistics. Employees watched the new company sign being installed outside headquarters. Many understood its meaning immediately. The future would be built on accountability instead of personality. Ariana then reviewed every leadership position. She wasn't looking for the loudest voices. She looked for the people who solved problems every day without asking for recognition. Her first recommendation was Simone Ellis. For years, Simone had quietly managed regional operations with outstanding results. Delivery performance improved under her leadership. Drivers respected her. Warehouse supervisors trusted her. Department managers relied on her judgment. Ariana invited Simone into her office. "I'd like you to become Chief Operating Officer." Simone looked stunned. Me? Yes. I've never held that position. You've already been doing the work. You simply never had the title. Simone accepted. Employees welcomed the decision. They knew she had earned it. Next, Ariana promoted Marcus Doyle to oversee fleet operations across every region. His maintenance programs had reduced breakdowns. Driver satisfaction continued improving. Customers noticed more reliable deliveries. His promotion received the same positive response. Ariana continued strengthening every department. She asked managers one simple question: if you could improve one thing, what would it be? The answers were remarkably similar. Departments needed better communication. Managers wanted clearer reporting systems. Employees wanted stronger ethics training. Financial oversight needed another layer of protection. Ariana listened carefully. Within weeks, those recommendations became company policy. Every manager completed leadership training. Every executive signed updated ethics agreements. Anonymous reporting procedures allowed employees to raise concerns without fear. No concern would ever be ignored because of someone's job title. The culture slowly changed. People spoke more openly. Managers worked more closely together. Employees realized their opinions mattered. Customers noticed improvements as well. Shipment tracking became more accurate. Communication became faster. Service continued improving. Industry publications began writing about the company's recovery. Several reporters requested interviews with Ariana. For years, she had avoided cameras. This time, she accepted. One interviewer asked, "How did your company recover so quickly?" Ariana answered simply, "We stopped focusing on one leader. We focused on every employee." Another reporter asked, "Are you trying to rebuild your public image?" She smiled. "I'm rebuilding the company's future." The interview spread across the transportation industry. Investors appreciated her honesty. Customers respected her leadership. Employees felt proud of where they worked. Outside the office, Ariana faced another responsibility. James had watched his family change almost overnight. He understood his father no longer worked at the company. He knew adults were dealing with serious problems. One evening, he sat beside Ariana after dinner. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Is the company going to be okay?" She smiled. "It will." "Are you sure?" "I wouldn't tell you otherwise." He nodded. "I miss how things used to be." "I know." She placed her hand on his shoulder. "Some things change. What matters is what we choose to build next." James quietly accepted her answer. She never filled his mind with anger. She never spoke badly about Holden. She protected her son's heart as carefully as she protected the company. Every morning, Ariana arrived before most employees. Every evening, she returned home in time to eat dinner with James. She reviewed board reports after he went to bed. She attended school events whenever possible. She refused to become so busy saving the company that she lost the family still depending on her. Month after month, Gabriel Integrated Logistics grew stronger. The crisis that nearly destroyed everything had become the foundation for a better company. Ariana finally saw something she had not felt since the board meeting. Hope, not because the hardest days were over, because she knew the company was finally being led the way it should have been from the very beginning. The independent investigation ended 4 months later. The final report confirmed what the board already suspected. Holden had approved company payments that financed his private relationship with Teresa. Corporate money paid for travel. Corporate money covered housing. Corporate money funded expenses unrelated to Tucker Logistics. The investigators found no evidence that Ariana, Calvin, Elaine, Victor, Naomi, or any other executive participated in the misconduct. The responsibility rested with Holden alone. The board immediately accepted the report. His suspension became permanent. His employment officially ended. Civil claims followed. Holden repaid part of the misused company funds through negotiated settlements. Attorney fees continued growing. His savings disappeared quickly. The expensive lifestyle he once enjoyed vanished. The luxury vehicle was sold. The vacation property was sold. Investment accounts were drained. The public success he once displayed disappeared almost as quickly as it had arrived. The transportation industry also responded. Companies that once competed to recruit him quietly withdrew their offers. Consulting firms stopped returning his calls. Every interview reached the same question: what happened at Tucker Logistics? No explanation changed the facts. His reputation had become his greatest obstacle. Meanwhile, life with Teresa became very different. The excitement that brought them together faded under financial pressure. Instead of planning an easy future, they spent most conversations discussing bills, legal matters, and public attention. Arguments became more frequent. Both realized the relationship had begun with promises that reality could no longer support. One evening, Teresa looked at Holden. "You told me everything would be different." Holden lowered his head. "I believed it, but it wasn't true." He had no answer. Months later, they separated. They continued raising their daughter, but their relationship ended. The life Holden imagined never happened. Across town, Ariana focused on something far more important: James. He loved both parents. He also knew they no longer lived the same life they once had. One Saturday afternoon, he sat beside Ariana on the back porch. "Mom?" "Yes?" "Are you angry with Dad?" She answered honestly, "I'm disappointed." "Is that the same thing?" "No." "What's the difference?" "Anger makes you want someone to suffer. Disappointment reminds you they made choices that hurt themselves." James thought about her answer. "Will you ever forgive him?" Ariana smiled gently. "Forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It means I won't allow it to control the rest of my life." James nodded. "I think I understand." She looked at him. "You never have to choose between loving your parents. You only have to choose what kind of man you'll become." Those words stayed with him. Ariana never criticized Holden in front of James. Whenever father and son planned to spend time together, she encouraged it. She reminded James to answer his father's calls. She never used her own pain to damage their relationship. One evening, Claudia asked the question many people were thinking. "After everything Holden did, why are you still helping James stay close to him?" Ariana smiled. "Because Holden failed as my husband. He didn't stop being James's father." Claudia reached across the table and held her daughter's hand. "Your father would be proud of you." Ariana smiled quietly. "I hope so." Time continued moving forward. 1 year passed. Then another. Gabriel Integrated Logistics expanded into new markets. Customer satisfaction reached record levels. Driver retention improved. Profits increased steadily. Industry organizations recognized the company for ethical leadership and operational excellence. Business schools invited Ariana to speak about responsible leadership. She accepted the invitations, not to celebrate herself, but to explain how honesty protects an organization during difficult times. Whenever reporters asked about Holden, she always gave the same answer. This company wasn't rebuilt by one person. It was rebuilt by people who chose to do the right thing every day. Employees appreciated those words. She never turned the company into a story about revenge. She turned it into a story about responsibility. 5 years passed. Gabriel Integrated Logistics became one of the most respected logistics companies in the Southeast. Its reputation exceeded anything Tucker Logistics had achieved. Employees trusted leadership. Customers remained loyal. Investors expressed confidence. The company had become stronger because it learned from its hardest season instead of hiding from it. One quiet morning, Ariana stood in her office, looking through the large window at trucks leaving the distribution center. Each truck represented families earning a living. Each delivery represented promises being kept. Years earlier, she thought success meant building a profitable company. Now she understood something much deeper. Success meant protecting people who trusted her. At that moment, Naomi Brooks knocked on the office door carrying a single resume. "I think you should see this." Ariana accepted the folder. She read the name. Holden Tucker. He was applying for a position at Gabriel Integrated Logistics. Not as chief executive officer, not as a director, not even as a senior executive. He wanted to return as a senior operations manager. Ariana closed the folder slowly. The next decision would test everything she had taught the company about accountability, fairness, and second chances. Ariana looked at the resume for several moments. The name on the first page was familiar. Holden Tucker. 5 years earlier, he had walked out of the same building after losing everything. Now he wanted to return. Not as chief executive officer, not as an executive, not as a board member. He had applied for the position of senior operations manager. Naomi watched Ariana carefully. "What would you like me to do?" Ariana closed the folder. "Schedule an interview." Naomi looked surprised. "You want to interview him?" "Yes." "You don't want to reject the application?" "No." "He'll be treated like every other applicant." Naomi nodded. "I'll arrange it." After Naomi left, Ariana looked through the resume again. She noticed something different. There were no exaggerated achievements, no inflated titles, no attempt to hide the past. His recent work history listed temporary operations positions, warehouse consulting assignments, and short-term logistics projects. Everything was straightforward. She placed the resume aside. The hiring process would decide the outcome. Later that afternoon, Ariana called a meeting with Calvin, Simone, Victor, and Denise. Each of them received a copy of Holden's application. The room became quiet. Simone spoke first. "I didn't expect this." Neither did anyone else. Calvin finished reading the last page. "His operational experience is still strong." Victor nodded. "No one can question that." Denise looked toward Ariana. "The bigger question isn't experience. It's trust." Ariana agreed. "That's exactly why we're meeting." Simone placed the resume on the table. "I'll be honest. I have concerns." Ariana looked at her. "So do I. What if employees think we've forgotten everything that happened? We haven't. What if customers hear he's back? We'll deal with it honestly. What if he repeats the same mistakes?" Ariana answered immediately. "Then he'll face the same consequences as anyone else." Calvin leaned forward. "I've spent years rebuilding financial controls. I don't want anyone believing we're lowering our standards." "We aren't," Ariana replied. "Our standards are exactly why he's receiving an interview instead of special treatment." Victor smiled slightly. "Explain that." Ariana looked around the room. "If we tell employees every person deserves a fair opportunity, we have to believe it ourselves. If we reject someone before the interview simply because of their past, we're abandoning the values we've spent years building." Denise nodded. "Fairness has to apply to everyone." "Exactly." Calvin looked back at the resume. He admits responsibility in his cover letter. He doesn't blame anyone. He doesn't blame the board. He doesn't blame the investigation. He doesn't blame you. Ariana nodded. "I noticed that." Victor continued reading. One sentence caught his attention. He read it aloud. "I understand trust cannot be requested. It must be earned through consistent actions." Victor lowered the letter. "That's the strongest sentence in this application." Simone agreed. "Anyone can write the right words. The interview will tell us whether he believes them." Ariana nodded. "And that's why we'll interview him." The hiring committee agreed. No promises would be made. No favors would be given. Holden would complete the same process every management candidate completed. The following morning, Naomi called Holden. "This is Naomi Brooks from Gabriel Integrated Logistics." Holden immediately recognized her voice. "Good morning. We've reviewed your application." He waited. "We'd like to invite you for an interview." He closed his eyes for a brief moment. "Thank you. The interview is next Tuesday at 9 o'clock. I'll be there." After ending the call, Holden sat quietly at his kitchen table. 5 years earlier, he had entered the company through the executive entrance. Now he would enter as an applicant. For the first time in many years, he felt grateful for an opportunity most people considered ordinary. Meanwhile, Ariana looked through the office window as employees crossed the parking lot below. She wasn't preparing to meet the man she once married. She was preparing to evaluate a candidate. If Gabriel Integrated Logistics truly stood for fairness, accountability, and integrity, this interview would prove whether those principles apply to everyone. The hardest test of leadership had just begun. Tuesday morning arrived. Holden parked in the employee parking lot. 5 years earlier, he had driven into a reserved executive space. Today he walked through the same front entrance carrying only a folder containing his resume. He greeted the receptionist. "Good morning." She smiled politely. "Good morning." She handed him a visitor badge. "Please have a seat. Someone will be with you shortly." Holden thanked her and sat down. He looked around the lobby. The building looked familiar. The atmosphere felt different. Employees greeted one another by name. Managers stopped to speak with drivers. Warehouse supervisors walked through the lobby discussing deliveries with dispatch teams. The company no longer revolved around one executive. It worked as one organization. Holden quietly smiled. The changes were easy to see. A few minutes later, Naomi walked into the lobby. "Good morning." "Good morning." "They're ready for you." He stood. "Thank you." She led him toward the executive conference room. As they reached the door, Holden recognized it immediately. 5 years earlier, he had entered that room as chief executive officer. He had walked out without a title. Today he returned asking for another opportunity. Naomi opened the door. Inside sat Ariana, Calvin, Simone, Victor, Denise, the same people who had helped rebuild the company. Holden walked inside. "Good morning." Everyone returned the greeting. Ariana motioned toward the chair. "Please have a seat." He sat down. Ariana looked at the file in front of her. "Mr. Tucker, today's interview follows the same process we use for every management candidate." "I understand. No one here has already decided the outcome." "I understand. We'll evaluate your qualifications, experience, judgment, and leadership." "That's fair." Ariana nodded. "Let's begin." Simone asked the first questions. "How would you improve warehouse efficiency during peak shipping seasons?" Holden answered with practical recommendations. He explained better scheduling, preventive equipment maintenance, closer coordination between dispatch and warehouse teams. He focused on operations instead of theory. Simone wrote several notes. Calvin spoke next. "If fuel costs suddenly increase, what would be your first priority?" "Protect customer service. Then reduce unnecessary operating costs before asking customers to absorb higher prices." Calvin nodded. "Good." Victor leaned forward. "How would you motivate employees after a difficult financial year?" "By being honest. If people know the truth, they'll usually work through problems. If leaders hide the truth, trust disappears." Victor quietly wrote another note. Denise continued. "What makes a good manager?" Holden answered immediately. "Someone who listens before making decisions." "What makes a poor manager?" "Someone who believes the rules apply only to everyone else." No one spoke for a moment. The interview continued. They discussed driver retention, safety, leadership, customer service. Holden answered each question directly. He never exaggerated his experience. He never claimed to know everything. Finally, Calvin closed his notebook. "I have one last question." Holden looked at him. "If we hire you, why should employees trust you?" Holden answered without hesitation. "They shouldn't." The room remained quiet. "They shouldn't trust me because I ask them to. They should trust me only after I've earned it." Calvin nodded slowly. Victor spoke next. "What have the last 5 years taught you?" Holden looked around the room. "They taught me that success doesn't excuse bad character. I confused recognition with respect. I believed I could make dishonest choices in my personal life without damaging my professional life. I was wrong. I lost both." Denise asked another question. "Do you blame anyone for what happened?" "No. Not Ariana. Not the board. Not Calvin. Not the investigators. I made those decisions. I accept the consequences." The room became quiet again. For the first time that morning, Ariana spoke. She looked directly at Holden. "If you're hired, you'll report to Simone. She'll evaluate your performance. She'll approve your leave. She'll recommend promotions. She'll recommend disciplinary action if necessary. You won't receive special authority because you once led this company. Can you accept that?" Holden answered immediately. "Yes. No conditions. No expectations. I'll earn every responsibility." Ariana continued. "If someone who never knew your history becomes your supervisor in the future, I'll report to them. If a younger manager corrects your work, I'll listen. If your ideas aren't accepted, I'll support the final decision. Ariana nodded. Thank you. She closed the file. That concludes the interview. Holden stood. Thank you for giving me the opportunity. He nodded respectfully to everyone. Then he walked out of the room. After the door closed, no one spoke immediately. The committee reviewed their notes. Simone looked around the table. His operational knowledge is still excellent. Calvin agreed. I didn't hear a single excuse. Denise nodded. He accepted responsibility from the beginning. Victor looked toward Ariana. What do you think? Ariana answered calmly. My opinion carries 1 vote. The decision belongs to all of us. Everyone nodded. That was exactly how Gabriel Integrated Logistics had been built. Not on one person's authority, but on shared responsibility. The committee prepared to vote. The interview committee reviewed every candidate using the same standards. Experience, leadership, integrity, accountability. No one received special treatment. No one received special criticism. Ariana looked around the table. We've heard every interview. It's time to decide. Victor spoke first. From an operational standpoint, Holden is qualified. Simone nodded. I agree. His knowledge is current. He understands the work. Calvin looked at his notes. What impressed me wasn't his experience. It was his willingness to accept responsibility. Denise added, he never blamed anyone. He accepted every consequence. Ariana listened without interrupting. She wanted every opinion before giving her own. Victor turned toward her. You've said very little. She smiled. I've been listening. What do you think? I believe people deserve to be judged by the standards we expect everyone else to meet. She continued. If we tell employees accountability matters, then accountability must include the opportunity to earn trust again. Not through words, through actions. The room agreed. Victor looked around the table. Shall we vote? Everyone nodded. The vote began. One hand after another was raised. The decision was unanimous. Holden would receive the position of Senior Operations Manager. Naomi called him later that afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Tucker. Good afternoon. I'm pleased to let you know you've been selected for the position. Holden smiled. Thank you. Naomi continued. The offer comes with the same expectations applied to every manager. I understand. You'll report directly to Chief Operating Officer Simone Ellis. I understand. You'll complete orientation, ethics training, and all company onboarding requirements. I'll be there. Welcome to Gabriel Integrated Logistics. Thank you. On Monday morning, Holden returned to the company. He parked beside every other employee. He entered through the main entrance. He received a permanent identification badge. He completed orientation with newly hired managers. He attended ethics training. He signed company policies. He accepted every step without complaint. Nothing reminded employees of the former chief executive officer. He had become another manager doing his job. Simone handed him his schedule. We start early. I'll be ready. She smiled. I expected that. The following months tested Holden in ways success never had. He visited warehouses before sunrise. He listened to drivers. He worked beside dispatch teams. He solved scheduling problems. He accepted feedback from supervisors. When mistakes happened, he corrected them immediately. He stopped trying to prove himself through speeches. He allowed his work to speak for him. Employees noticed. Some remained cautious. Others slowly changed their opinions. Trust returned, one day at a time. Nothing came quickly. Holden accepted that. James also noticed the difference. One afternoon after school, he visited company headquarters. He watched through a conference room window. Ariana, Simone, Calvin, Holden, all four were discussing operational reports. Nobody argued. Nobody looked uncomfortable. Everyone focused on improving the business. James smiled. For years he wondered whether respect could exist after disappointment. Now he had his answer. It could. Time continued moving forward. Several years later, Ariana accepted an invitation to speak at a national conference for young entrepreneurs. The auditorium was full. Business owners, students, executives, future leaders. Near the end of her presentation, one attendee asked, "What is the most important lesson you've learned about leadership?" Ariana smiled. "For many years, I believed ownership meant building a successful company." She looked across the audience. "I've learned something much greater. Ownership means responsibility. It means protecting people who trust you. It means making difficult decisions fairly. It means doing the right thing when nobody is watching." She continued, "Titles can disappear. Money can disappear. Reputation can disappear. But character follows you everywhere." The audience rose to its feet. The applause continued for several moments. As Ariana stepped away from the podium, she looked toward the front row. James stood proudly, applauding his mother. A few seats away, Holden also stood. He applauded with everyone else, not because Ariana had defeated him, because she had become the leader she had always been from the very beginning. As they left the auditorium together, James walked between his parents. He smiled at both of them. Years earlier, one decision had nearly destroyed a family and a company. Years later, honesty, accountability, humility, and forgiveness had rebuilt lives that pride almost ruined. Thank you for spending your time with Will and Rise Stories. If this story reminded you that integrity is worth more than success, please like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Your support helps us continue bringing meaningful stories that inspire, encourage, and stay with people long after the story ends.